everybody, Questwise here, and I have my Riffs hat on today. That means it's time for Riffs England part number 2. We're going to finish up talking about this book today, and then at the end of this video I'll tell you what book we're going to move on to after this in the series. First off, you might notice that we have a little bit of an upgrade to our video quality. Hopefully that comes through on your end. Also, I hope the audio on this is a little bit better. I've tried to do a little bit of an upgrade, make things a little bit better, but I don't know how YouTube's going to translate that. So, on to the good stuff. Today we're going to do part 2 of Riffs England, and we'll finish out this book today. A lot of stuff in the second. There's a lot of stuff in this whole book. It's really crammed. It's what I really love about the Palladium line of books, is that there's a lot of stuff crammed into usually pretty small, amount of space. A lot of really great content. The other thing I really love about the Palladium set of role-playing games is that they're fun to read. There's just some great stuff in here, some very imaginative, very cool stuff to read. A lot of times, sometimes RPG rule books can be just really boring. It's just rules, it's just stats, it's just how to do things. And while that's in here, there's also lots of fun things to read, and these world books are fantastic for that kind of stuff as well too. First off, I want to talk about certain mystics, and actually there's one right here on the cover of the book in this fantastic piece by Keith Parkinson. Really not much to say about them other than I think they're really cool. I think they're really fun. It's a racial character class option, as well as a choice for a cool villain. But they have this weird ability to control giantes or gigantes, which are these things here in the background. It's just part of their ability. They're also mystics, so they can use magic. But very, very cool. I just think they're really cool. They look really, really cool. Keith Parkinson's one of my all-time favorite fantasy artists. Had the pleasure of actually meeting him several years ago and getting an art print signed by him and stuff too before he passed away. But he's always been one of my favorites. I just love his attention to detail, and the way he painted things was amazing. If you haven't seen any of his stuff before, I encourage you to go check out any of Keith Parkinson's art and stuff as well too. So the Cernan Mystics, I just threw them in there because I think they're cool. There's a bunch of other creatures in there, as well as some other racial character classes and stuff as well too. But I want you to explore those. So if you haven't seen the England book, or you don't own it, I want to leave a little bit of mystery in there for you to discover as well. The other thing that we're going to encounter shortly after those racial character classes and monsters is Temporal Magic. And this is the ability to warp space and time. This section of the book comes with several different OCCs and RCCs. That's occupational character classes and racial character classes. But it also involves Temporal Magic. And some of this stuff is... and this is magic that's only available to Temporal Wizards and Temporal Warriors and stuff. We'll get into that in a second. But some of this magic is very powerful. It is extremely powerful. And thus the cost of casting those spells is very, very high. Some of them as high as like 350 PPE to cast those things as well too. But some really cool things. D-shifting or dimensional shifting, remote viewing, time warping. Some really, really cool spells in there as well too. But as far as OCCs, you get the Temporal Wizard and the Temporal Warrior. Now the Temporal Wizard is just that. He's a wizard who deals with warping to space and time. Being able to phase out of one dimension into another, being able to remote view from different locations, and doing a lot of other cool stuff that deals with space and time and warping type things. The Temporal Warrior is a fighter class, but it's also it has the ability to cast some magic as well too, sort of enhance his abilities, or their abilities, to be able to move around the battlefield and to shift time enough to sort of influence them and to be able to affect their attacks and stuff. Then we get a new optional racial character class. It's also considered one of the villains, a Temporal Raider. It is a DB that has the ability to warp space and time as well too. So it's more focused on being a new villain, but it is an optional RCC as well too. After that section, we go into the biggest section at the end of this book, and that's on New Camelot. And as far as talking about England after the coming of the rifts and the apocalypse and the cataclysm that has happened 300 years into the future after this has happened, 300 and some years after, you have to have, it's England, you have to talk about Camelot, you have to talk about Arthur, you have to talk about Merlin and stuff. And that's in here. And it's what's really interesting about this and the way that Palladium Books has decided to do this is that there's a really unique twist to the whole idea. And the way it's set up is that there are Knights of Camelot. There are, Percival and Galahad and all those kind of people. And, there's, if you've read any Arthurian myths or Arthurian legends, there's this idea that after Arthur died, there was this sort of prophecy about him saying that he would come back in England's greatest time of need. And so that's kind of what this is whole thing about. Arthur, or Arturu, as I call him in the book here, is a good person. He's an NPC that you can encounter, and he has all the best intentions, but he's sort of naive in that fact. Merlin and the Lady of the Lake are not who they seem to be, and they have they're using him. They're sort of staging him to sort of take over. They're staging him to bring about what their secret objectives are. And so thus they've told him that he's this prophesied one to come and save England, and that he's going to rule, and that he's he's the chosen one, if it were. And so Merlin and the Lady of the Lake are actually, and Lady Guinevere too, which is that cool betrayal that's always sort of there floating in the Arthurian mythos, are actually an alien intelligence from somewhere out in the rifts, that their essence has sort of shattered into these different pieces. So Merlin is a part of that. He's a shard of that shattering. Lady of the Lake and Lady Guinevere, who was actually set up as a possible ley line walker as well too. So some really cool, interesting storylines in there that you can play with and put into your campaigns. In that, you encounter Merlin and some of these other knights, and they come off as being these very heroic people, and they are in their own minds, and in truth, they are truly good, honorable people. But it's Merlin and the Lady of the Lake that are steering them into some secret objectives and some secret sort of paths that to fulfill their own objectives, their own needs, and their own wants and stuff. So there's some really, really cool stuff in here, and it would make a really cool campaign to have characters a part of that, trying to discover that aspect of Merlin, and trying to oust that whole thing, and changing, maybe having Artur, how do you pronounce his name, Arturu, to sort of band against Merlin and try to take over. Now, Merlin is not an easy enemy. It's not one of those things you want to do at first level. You want to build up to this. It's very much a campaign kind of an idea. Because he is part of an alien intelligence, a super powerful, almost godlike alien intelligence. He's a part of that. He's a very, very tough enemy, as is the Lady of the Lake as well, too. So we get a lot of, Merlin has his own sort of minions called Nexus Knights. And we get a cool look at New Camelot and the land, the lay of the land of England at the time, including all the ley line nexuses of things like Stonehenge and Merlin's Pyramid, which again I will leave for you to discover. And there's a whole bunch of different places of note throughout England of where ley lines cross and they meet at nexuses, and how that affects different things. The Kingdom of the Fae brings about all those sort of Arthurian myths and English folklore into the Rifts universe, and makes it part of that mythos as well, too, a new mythos. There's also a section on Celtic gods and how they exist in Rift's Earth and how they've come back to Earth and made themselves sort of known to fit into what's happening on Rift's Earth at this current time. And then at the very end of the book, there are several adventures that kind of get you started into, acclimated into what Rift's England really is. Very, very cool book. I highly recommend this to anybody. This is actually Worldbook number 3. Worldbook number 2 being Atlantis. And if you don't have this book already, I definitely recommend going and checking it out. And if you already do, go back and kind of re-explore this. There's some really cool stuff in this. Next week, we're going to go straight to, and then like I said, this is going to be kind of random, kind of based upon what I want to read and what I want to review. So next week, we're going to dive into part 1, which is, this actually might be a 3-part series on this book, because it's a little bit bigger. But we're going to go to Rifts, Australia, and talk about what's going on in the land down under. So until next time, I am Questwise. Game on, my friends. Stay safe.